Thank you. Thank you all for coming out on a windy, rainy night. What I thought I would do is I'm going to start off by telling you about something that really happened to me that was what gave me the inspiration to write this book. Because after I got over the trauma of the thing that actually happened to me, I decided it would be a really, really good way to start a psychological thriller. So I'll tell you the gossip behind the book first, and then I'll move on from that to telling you about the book, which obviously I had to add some fictional aspects to make it into a proper psychological thriller murder mystery, because the real story didn't involve murder, thankfully, although it nearly did. I take a lot of inspiration from real life. Almost all of my books, in fact all of them apart from one, have been initially inspired by things that really happened. Situations in real life that I thought were so odd or so unusual or so baffling that I sort of couldn't let go of them in my mind, and so I added to them. Because I always think when I'm in an unusual situation, I always think, what if it became even more unusual? What if you just added this element or that element? And that is, apart from one of my books, that's how all the others started, with that kind of thing. So the carrier, the idea for the carrier first came to me when I was in Germany. I'd been on a book tour because one of my books had just come out in German, so I'd been over to Germany promoting it, and I was due to fly home at I think about 8:30, and I was sitting with all the other passengers at the boarding gate. Now normally when you get as far as the boarding gate, you can reasonably assume that the plane is there on the other side of the boarding gate. They don't normally let you get that far if there is no plane. So I was thinking, you know, what could possibly go wrong? And there was an announcement saying, terribly sorry, because of bad weather conditions, the plane has been rerouted to Cologne Airport. We were at Dusseldorf Airport, and I didn't know the distances involved, but certainly Cologne Airport didn't sound very near to Dusseldorf Airport, and the main thing was that it wasn't Dusseldorf Airport. That was the main problem. And so this chap said, everybody who's checked in a bag will have to go to baggage reclaim and collect their bag, and then go and wait outside the departures hall, and we think there are coaches coming to take you to Cologne Airport. So everyone was sort of groaning and thinking, oh no, this is the end of the world. And the whole sort of psychological thing of having to go and reclaim from the baggage carousel the bag that you've only checked in an hour and a half ago, you know, everyone was not happy about this. So anyway, I went to get my bag, went and stood outside the departures hall, and there was a young woman standing about 4 feet away from me, unwrapping an enormous packet of cigarettes. And I thought, that's a good idea. This would be a good time to take up smoking again. But I didn't have any cigarettes, and she had too many, so I thought, oh, I'll just ask for a cigarette. So I sort of sidled over to her, and I said, excuse me, I couldn't possibly buy a cigarette from you, could I? She said, oh, no problem here, have a packet. Look, I've got plenty, you know, we Brits with delayed planes must stick together. So she gave me this packet of cigarettes, and I went and stood away from her again, lit a cigarette, and about 4 or 5 seconds later, she burst into tears, dropped all her cigarettes on the floor, ran over to me, flung herself into my arms, and I mean, my arms were not available, you know. One of them was holding a cigarette and the other was firmly at my side. And she said, I'm falling apart, I'm having a panic attack, and you have to look after me. And I just thought, oh no, why didn't I ask somebody else for a cigarette? But I mean, I didn't know what to say. I didn't feel that I could say, well, I don't really want to look after you, actually. I just want to smoke my cigarette and then read my book. So basically, she latched onto me and she would not let go. As soon as she told me that I was looking after her, she made it clear that she really meant it and that this was an obligation I was going to have to fulfill. And she basically clung to me, physically clung to me from then on. So the coach arrived, we got on it, she said, you're sitting next to me. And I was thinking, oh no, this is a nightmare. And she starts pouring out this tale of woe. She's never been abroad before. She's never been anywhere without her parents or her boyfriend before. The only reason she was in Germany on her own was because she was visiting her boyfriend, who's a soldier, and he was stationed somewhere in Germany. So we get onto the coach, and she, one by one, she rings every member of her family. And to each of them, she says exactly the same thing in a thick Geordie accent. She says, I'm having a panic attack, falling apart, but it's okay. I've met a nice lady called Sophie and she's looking after me. Oh no, sorry, a nice middle-aged lady. Which was a detail that ended up in the book. I couldn't resist putting it in the book. And I was 38 at the time, you know. I'm 41 now, so it would have been a bit fairer as an allegation. But when I was 38, it really did seem a bit much to call me middle-aged. But she was only 19. So she was telling everyone what a terrible state she was in. She was falling apart. I was looking after her. And then she was also, in between doing this, she was randomly attacking other people on the coach in a way that kind of tried to implicate me because I was with her. So she'd drag me out of my seat and go, come over here, come over here, come over here. So I'd follow her. And we'd get to a seat where somebody was quite happily sitting there reading a magazine or a newspaper or a book. These were the people she didn't like. The people she liked were the ones who were standing around going, oh, bloody hell, travel delays, oh, planes, oh, airports. Those are the people she liked. Anyone who was just opting out, reading a book, she hated them and was suspicious of them. So she would drag me over to these people and go, look at him there, thinking he's better than me with his book. And I would have to say, no, Helen, calm down. He's not thinking he's better than you, although he probably is, but he's not thinking that. You know, let's go and sit down. Anyway, so we get to Cologne Airport. By now it's about 11:30, midnight. At Cologne Airport, we're told that our crew, who are meant to be flying us home, have just exceeded their limit. Their, you know, ability to fly people around limit. So they're all off to bed. And we're going to be taken back to the coach where we're going to be taken to a hotel overnight and then we'll hopefully fly back in the morning. But by this point, everyone was thinking, am I ever going to get home? So we go to this hotel, we get into reception. The reception area was very small and there were about 200 of us. So we're sort of spilling out the door and something is being said at the front of the crowd, which we can't quite hear at the back, but it sounds like bad news because there's this ripple of horror spreading backwards and I'm thinking, what could this be? This does not sound good. Anyway, finally we find out anyone travelling alone will have to share a room with a stranger. Of course, I was thinking, this is my opportunity to escape. I can manage somehow to share a room with a more appealing stranger, which wouldn't be hard. I would actually have taken anyone on the plane rather than Helen from Middlesbrough. But no, she grabbed me by the wrist and stared into my eyes and she said, you're sharing with me. I thought, oh no. Now the hotel was not very nice and I'd just spent a week in Germany in another not very nice hotel and I just thought I can't stay in another awful hotel. So I said, right, Helen, we can't stay here. It's a horrible hotel. We don't want to share a room. We've never met before. I'm going to get my phone. I'm going to Google the nearest 5-star hotel and we'll go there and I will pay for you to have your own room. And I'll have my own room and it'll be much nicer. Anyway, she bursts into tears again. I thought this might be a nice thing. Good news, you know, glad tidings. But no, she burst into tears again and said, I'm not the kind of person who can go to a 5-star hotel. She said, you better not leave me. You better not go off on your own and leave me and go off to a 5-star hotel. And I was thinking, well, that's exactly what I would like to do. But I was too scared to because I knew that I would see her the next day on the plane and at the airport. And I'd seen how she had viciously attacked people who'd done nothing wrong. So I dreaded to think what she would do to me if I actually abandoned her and then reappeared at the airport. So I couldn't do that. So I thought, okay, I'm just going to have to accept this. It won't be too bad sharing a room with Helen from Middlesbrough. Anyway, we get up to the room after waiting 2 hours while the receptionist sorts out all the keys. So by now it's like 1:30 in the morning. We get up to the room and inside the room is one small double bed, about the size of the average sofa bed, with a single duvet and only one pillow. And I thought, I just cannot share a bed with this woman. And I said to her, I don't suppose you fancy sleeping on the floor, do you? You know, you're young and strong and resilient. You won't mind sleeping on the floor. She said, I'm not sleeping on the floor. And I knew that I couldn't sleep on the floor either because I just wouldn't have been able to fall asleep. So I thought, I really am going to have to share a bed with Helen from Middlesbrough. And the whole thing just went from bad to worse. You know, so we get into bed. She says to me, now you won't mind if I cuddle you in the night. I said, well, I might mind that. She said, well, in my sleep, I might mistake you for our Jason. Well, then her stomach started rumbling absolutely horrifically. And I said, are you hungry? She said, yeah, I've not eaten for more than 24 hours. I said, oh, well, that's no good. And there was a service station opposite the hotel across the dual carriageway. There was a sort of petrol station. And actually, thinking about it, as soon as she said she'd not eaten for 24 hours, I thought, she looks starving. I mean, she was skinny as a rake, this woman. She was probably anorexic, actually. I just assumed she was thin because she was young and not me. But no, I think she had an actual problem. So we went over to the service station. She didn't have any money. She didn't have a single euro. So I said, OK, I will buy you something to eat. So we get to the service station. There's a fridge full of sandwiches and, you know, quite nice stuff, actually, Haagen-Dazs, all kinds of things. So I said, right, choose some food. So she's looking at the fridge like this. I'm not eating any of that muck. I said, why not? She said, German. Not eating German food. I thought, oh, God. So in the end, she bought a packet of Pringles. Then we get back to the hotel. Anyway, managed to get some sleep. Next morning, we go to the airport. She still hasn't eaten anything. She wouldn't eat any breakfast. We get to the airport, and I'm buying her more cigarettes. We've smoked all the cigarettes by now. That was the one thing we were able to bond over, was our desire to smoke lots of cigarettes. So we get to the airport, buying more cigarettes with my money. And there's a little sort of one of those round plastic racks of paperback books. You know, there's about 12 books on this rack. And one of them is my book in German that I was over there to promote. So she knows my name because we did the whole, you know, what do you do and what's your name thing the day before. And she was incredibly thick, this woman. She was the stupidest person I've ever met. So she sees my book and she goes, look, that's your name on that book. I said, yes, I know, that's my book in German. Remember I told you I was here for the new book? She said, oh, right. And then she looks at this rack again, and, you know, there's John Grisham, Stephen King, Michael Connolly. She stands back and she goes, so did you write all of those books then? I said, no, only the one with my name on it. So that was the true story. And although, you know, now it's a hilarious, bizarre story, at the time it was really awful because I just sort of went into survival mode. I honestly started to imagine that this might be what my life would be like forever. You know, everything else that I used to care about suddenly didn't count for anything. My life was now Helen and a coach. So I was very pleased to see the back of her, and it took me 2 years before I thought, actually, that would make a brilliant start to a book. Before then, I just couldn't bear to think about it. I was also fairly confident that I could get away with putting Helen in a book because she did say to me when she heard that I was an author that she'd never read a book. She'd read half of a book once and sort of got the feel of what reading a book was like, and then she didn't want to do any more. So I thought I can get away with it. And actually, she ends up being quite a good character. You know, she's actually one of the better people in the book. Which I never meant to do. I don't know why I made her so heroic, actually, but I ended up liking my fictional version of her more than the actual person. So the way in which I changed it to make it into a psychological thriller, because one thing that I really like doing in my books is starting with a mystery that's kind of more mysterious than usual. I don't tend to start my books with a dead body, and the mystery is never who killed the dead body. Because although I like those books and I read a lot of them, I always think they're not really that mysterious. Because the minute you meet a dead body, you pretty much know what's happened. Someone's killed the dead body. And even though you don't know exactly why, you pretty much know that they've done it because they didn't like them very much. And it's just a question of finding out which character in the book didn't like them for what reason. And I like to start my books with situations that are much, much weirder than that, and also, ideally, situations which seem impossible, with the kind of scenarios that will make readers think, no, this can't be happening, except it is, and so how can that be? What can possibly be going on? Just to sort of make it as mysterious and suspenseful as possible. So Gaby, the heroine of The Carrier, is in a German airport on her way back from a business trip. The plane is delayed and she finds herself having to share a room with an unstable young woman who latches onto her exactly as Helen from Middlesbrough latched onto me. But the difference is, the bit that I added, is that Lauren, who's the fictional version of Helen from Middlesbrough, is very distressed because she knows about somebody who is going to prison for a murder he didn't commit. She seems to be very distressed about this miscarriage of justice. And when Gaby tries to find out more, Lauren clams up and won't say anything else. She's obviously scared to talk about it. All she will say is, there's this man who's going to prison for a murder he didn't commit, and it's terrible, I don't know what to do, but I'm not saying any more. And whatever Gaby tries, she can't persuade Lauren to talk to her and tell her any more of the story. And because Lauren's behaving in such a sort of chaotic and unstable way, Gaby doesn't even know whether to believe Lauren. She thinks, you know, she could just be a complete nutter making up this story. So as soon as she has a chance, when Lauren is otherwise engaged, she Googles Lauren's name to see if anything comes up. And sure enough, lots of news articles come up, and it seems that Lauren is involved in a murder case, which Gaby is, you know, quite surprised and shocked by, but she's even more surprised and shocked to find that the man who's going to prison for a murder he didn't commit is a man called Tim Breary, who Gaby knows very well. And in fact, Tim Breary is the only man that Gaby has ever really loved. And she's still a little bit in love with him, but she's been trying not to think about him for many years. And so she's completely thrown by this news that he's going to prison for the murder of his wife, Francine, and Lauren seems to think he didn't do it. And Gaby's next thought is, can it be a coincidence that Lauren knows Tim and is somehow involved with him and Francine, and also happened to be on my flight from Germany? Gaby's quite suspicious. There's got to be a connection. That's got to explain why Lauren latched on to me rather than anyone else. And so Gaby is determined to get to the bottom of this. When she gets back to England, she goes straight to the police station and finds out that the situation is even more baffling than she had thought, because not only has Tim Breary been charged with the murder of his wife, he's actually confessed to the murder of his wife. And just to help things along, he's presented the police with a bundle of evidence proving that he murdered his wife, and he's got lots of reliable witnesses lined up to all attest to the fact that he murdered his wife. So he thinks he's got it covered, and he's quite cross that the police don't seem to be taking his word for it and accepting all this evidence. The police have a problem with the idea that he killed his wife, and their problem is that he claims to have no motive. He claims he murdered his wife for no reason whatsoever, and the police don't really think this is possible. And so they keep suggesting to him possible motives that he might have had. And everything they suggest, he says, nope, that wasn't why I did it. And they say, well, why did you do it? And he says, I didn't do it for a reason. I just did it. I was able to do it without a reason. So that's the mystery in The Carrier.